tepid 9 months. This is not what the new data showed. This is what the old data show. And I'm afraid I'm a believer in the old data until proven wrong. So the old data showed that GDP growth was hardly 5.3% in Q2. Manufacturing was, according to that index, was just 0.1, construction 4.2, and fixed capital formation 0. Truly dismal. There is a much more favorable thing that has just come out. But I would say that if you look at all the supplementary data, the old data somehow vibe more with the supplementary data than the new CSO figures. Q3 a little better, maybe okay. The earlier corporate results for Q3 are sobering. Nothing to write home about. Again, I see different things from different sources, but very clearly it's been a poor quarter. Exports up only 4%, because the global woes are there. There is a global slowdown. The IMF, I find, every single year comes out with optimistic projections, and there's an update which revises them down. It's happened 4 years in a row. I've just come from Washington, and on the 4th, there was once again a downgrade of global prospects. However, of course, imports are falling. Current account deficit this year, I think, will be below 2% of GDP, and for 2015, they say maybe less than 1% of GDP. However, very little fiscal space, 99% of the fiscal deficit is already gone. Tax revenue is up hardly 8% against the budgeted 19%. To me, this is the biggest single indicator that the revised data are wrong. If you are booming along 7.5%, you can't have a situation where excise duty growth is virtually zero. There's some improvement in the corporate and direct tax, but excise duty growth is more or less zero. That kind of economy, I'm afraid, cannot be the kind of boom economy being portrayed by the CSO. How has this new government performed? It's more gradualism than radical change. At the center, it is not that Modi has, some people were afraid that there's going to be a huge Hindutva agenda. In fact, Modi has moved towards the center. He has curbed excesses. This reminds me of the situation of Harold Wilson when he became Prime Minister in England. On the one hand, he was a Labour Party man, which meant he represented the trade unions. On the other hand, the trade unions were the biggest thorn in his flesh. So Modi also finds, I think, on the one hand, he cannot dissociate himself from the VHP and RSS, and on the other hand, they are a thorn in the flesh. It's a similar kind of situation. Modi repeated more or less the UPA's interim rail and general budget, a sign of gradualism. He accepted Aadhaar, Narega, the Jan Dhan and sanitation, Make in India. Most of these are ideas taken from the Congress party, given a fresh coat of paint and presented as a Modi initiative. And why is it that Modi has been gradualist rather than radical? I think one reason is that in Gujarat, Modi achieved a lot under the UPA framework. So it was clear to him that the UPA framework itself did not come in the way of his performing well in Gujarat. It's a question of doing it better through better administration. And I think that is the emphasis that he has brought to New Delhi so far. So as I said, while there was tepid performance for 9 months, there are some green shoots. Inflation is down credibly. Wholesale price index is almost zero. CPI 5%. The RBI has cut interest rates, and I was hoping for 100 basis points cut. But if Mr. Rajan believes the new GDP data, he'll say, wow, we are overheating. And there would be no question of any interest rates cuts. On the other hand, people will start saying that there is no output gap. What are we going to do? The oil price crash has helped the BOP, the fiscal deficit, and we now have higher tax revenue coming from oil instead of the subsidy. April, November, again, this is the old index. Capital goods up 7%. It's okay, but after so many bad years, it should be 20%. If it's to be at all respectable. Consumer durables fell 14% according to that April-November data. I don't know what the revised thing will show. But, this is a very mixed kind of picture. The one clear green shoot, the CMIE, measures investment intentions. It shows these up very sharply, more than 100%. And the number of stalled projects coming down. But if you ask the capital goods industry, are there actual orders? You are the construction industry, are the orders pouring in? The answer is no, and I note in L&T in this morning's papers has just cut its projection for the orders pipeline. The World Bank was very enthusiastic. Kaushik Basu is there, of course, on how things are going to get better. This was even before the upgrade of the CSO. The stock markets are up sharply, which makes it easier to sell PSU shares, to recapitalize banks, and for corporations to get new loans. The green shoots include truck sales are finally up. I think after about 3 years, finally commercial vehicle sales have turned up. Road tolls receipts have gone up. There's some increase in the core sector of coal, electricity, and cement. The bureaucracy unquestionably reinvigorated. Whether it has completely stopped being obfuscationist, I don't know, but without doubt there is more enthusiasm and vim and vigor in the bureaucracy. I just mentioned revised GDP data, fact or fiction. I think this is going to be an open question which is going to be debated for some time. Mr. P. Chidambaram has wrote a brilliant piece predicting the sacking of Mr. Anand, the chief statistician. Maybe it will happen. Let us see. So I said the World Bank was saying 6.4% growth in 2015, 7% in 2016. This is before the revision. If they accept the revision, and I think they're duty bound, because the World Bank does not have any independent data gathering sources. It depends on the national data. So they will, once again, suddenly declare that India, which we thought was in such bad shape, is the fastest growing economy, beating the pants off China. I'm not sure how much applause there will be on that, but that's what the World Bank projections will now show. So all we can say is there's lots of hope, but so far, from my point of view, no hard data on change except the CSO data. What has Modi done? Number of minor reforms, cash transfers for LPG, FDI. 49% insurance has been talked of before, offered by the 100% FDI in rail, he says. But the first step would have to be to corporatize the railways. If you don't corporatize the railways, how can any foreigner buy into it? And on there, Suresh Prabhu's noises have been very negative so far. He doesn't seem to be willing to corporatize the railways. Let's see what happens there. Javadekar has eased the green norms and cleared the background. I'm told he goes around asking, if you have any project, tell me, I'll clear it. I'm not sure that the environment will get protected, but certainly he seems to be very enthusiastic about clearing stuff. Some minor labor reforms, the major issues have not been touched at all. The RBI has allowed small banks, payment banks. This is part of a new generation of banks that could come up, some new initiatives in the private sector. It has some scope, but I think right now the big shadow is on the large banking sector, the rising NPAs, the inability to recapitalize public sector banks if you're going to insist on 52% government ownership, as seems to be the case. I saw the other day somebody said that, the government needs to take over the top 100 biggest defaulted loans, take it off the bank books, and only then they'll be able to get ahead. Even if you don't do it for 100 loans, some kind of very major structural overhaul is required for. And privatization is off the agenda right now, which is why I say basically it's a gradualist government. Some major reforms. Diesel was deregulated, which is a major reform, but that's basically because the price of oil fell. And I now ask, oil is now, Brent is just up to $57 after having been down to 45. What happens if Brent goes back to 80? Will the government then say, okay, let the price keep going up? Or will it once again have palpitations and begin to bring back some kind of price control? We don't know yet. The new coal law, it is allowing for the first time the option of private commercial mining. That definitely is a major reform. Although, shall I say, this has fallen into the government's lap. Because the Supreme Court struck down all the coal block allocations, something had to be done. And in that new law, they've put in this option for commercial mining. All to the good. I'll take it even if it arrives out of a Supreme Court decision rather than Modi's own initiative. The new mineral law has some prospects of bringing transparent bidding everywhere. We've had the situation where, because of individual discretion in allocations, the mining industry has been in a complete and total mess, and that same attitude has applied to illegal mining. I think India must be the only country with thousands and thousands of acres of illegal mining. State government knew about it, everybody knew about it, and nothing was being done about it. So the Supreme Court had to step in and completely stop. Now, this is a really blunt instrument, but in some sense, the overhaul is required. An overhaul is required, and if that means that first of all you go backwards, I think it's just as well. We do need to get something done. The new land law, well, let us see whether the ordinance finally gets changed into legislation. But yes, I mean, we needed something like this. The original land law, the land acquisition amendment, was supposed to expedite and make easy land acquisition. The end result was that it absolutely froze land acquisition. Nothing was being acquired. Now, that is not the only issue. There are other issues as well. But anyway, the new land law would be a major change. The biggest of all, I think, would be Modi's claim that he will improve India from 142nd to 50th position in the global ease of doing business index that the World Bank produces. Mr. Amitabh Kant in the DIPP has produced a long, voluminous chart of all kinds of things that are supposed to be done on each and every issue by all sides. I mean, it's a formidable document, and yet there's a certain lack of clarity if you go through it. Any document that is as dense and so full of so many provisions and discussions, I am a little hesitant about. But it does have a series of deadlines. Actually, some of those deadlines, I remember now, have already passed. Somebody should go back to Amitabh Kant's matrix and find out, what is the actual state of easing doing business. There are some very unclear policies to me. There is a talk of make in India. What on earth does it mean? I mean, make in India can be an outcome. I mean, if you have very good policies and everybody begins to improve manufacturing. But how can it be a policy? It can be a policy if only you somehow use protectionism to force the pace of manufacturing in some areas, which would be a retrograde step. Government procurement things. I mean, we're supposed to be an open market, but there is a 20% quota in all government procurement for medium and small and micro enterprises, within which there is a 4% sub-quota for businesses owned by scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. This kind of quota license thing, I'm afraid, is not about the ease of doing business. It's not about open markets. It's very much a continuation of the Congress vote bank approach. There is the idea of huge subsidies for electronics production. People are worried that India's electronics imports may exceed its oil imports. And so there's a proposal for some huge subsidies for a giant silicon fabrication factory. And that if you have all the silicon, then somehow there'll be a huge electronics industry that comes out of it. The logic of that escapes me totally, I have to confess. Okay, there's some talk of smart cities. I asked the Urban Affairs Secretary, what are smart cities? He says, we don't know, we are going to ask the cities for ideas. Actually, I thought it was a very good idea. That should be bottom up rather than top down. But as of now, we are not quite sure what smart cities are. Digital India, again, we're not entirely sure what it means. There is some talk of broadband in every village and e-governance through it. But e-governance is only as good as the quality of governance itself. If you don't update all your data, if the inputs are not there, the system that you produce is completely misleading. Structural hurdles, the PPP infrastructure model is comprehensively bust. The companies have all gone downhill. The banks are being dragged down with them, difficulties in lending. There was a 5-year plan which had an idea of $1 trillion of infrastructure, which half would come from private sector. That money is just not going to come. So how are you going to build infrastructure? On top of that, the problems of land, environment, forest, various of these other issues, all of these have caused large delays. And those delays and faulty projections of demand basically have killed the highly geared companies. I mean, we had a situation historically where government did infrastructure. And we got used to the idea of 5-year project takes 10 years, government. And the fact that there are some cost overruns, well, that out of the general taxes, you can always produce so much money and do it. But if you're in the private sector and you are a geared company with 70% debt and 30% equity, and a 5-year project becomes 10 years, you're dead. The delay itself has finished you off. So this is one of the issues that has hit a very large number of them. The electricity system is bust. People are talking about India becoming the fastest growing. How on earth can any economy function if the electricity system is bankrupt? State losses of the boards is estimated up to 200,000 crores. The discoms are bust all over the place and dragging down the banks with them. The tariffs have been revised, but in spite of that, many state governments keep giving free farm power. High T&D losses. Then again, for infrastructure, we've been having fixed bids for 25 years. In 25 years, so many things change, the traffic, the technology. And yet, if you try to change in the middle, everybody will shout corruption. And the answer, it probably will be true. I mean, there are other countries where changes take place without corruption. Here we've lost faith in the system. Case for new optimism, Modi wins many state elections and looks serious about reforms, though gradualist. And there is a case for saying that, if you are gradualist but keep doing something every few months, then this will add up over time. The 7 ordinances that he has issued, but we have the problem that the opposition don't allow the legislation to actually be passed. However, India remains a rare country with improving inflation, current account deficit, fiscal deficit, GDP prospects. There is a huge inflow of dollars, the stock markets are up, animal spirits are up. So there are many green shoots. Okay, so Akhilesh asked me, the new economics and new politics. The new economics, and I say actually not so new. Modi is a gradualist. He's not really for radical change. And yet gradualism can yield a lot in time. Productivity has to be increased. I would say Modi is the one prime minister who actually gets this. All the others tend to focus on this vote bank and that vote bank. But the importance of increasing productivity, the focus on ease of doing business, Modi is the first man to have done that. And that's positive. But there are deep structural problems. I would say they're still instinctively protectionist. We're unwilling to open up insurance, retail, and so on. What is wrong with 100% FDI? This business of multi-brand retail as opposed to single-brand retail, we have invented this. Nowhere in the world does this distinction exist between single brand and multi-brand. India needs to, this is a very important thing. The United States is negotiating a huge transatlantic treaty with Europe and a trans-Pacific one with Japan and the other ones. And those are going to set up a new bunch of trade rules. One of the aims is to cut out China. In the process, I think India is going to get cut out. There's a huge danger that in the business of India getting into the global thing, if India does not change its protectionist mindset, it's going to get cut out of these two. And then I think we're going to be in serious trouble 10 years from now. So we need to start changing our mindset on that. However, I still have hope that India will muddle through. We have done that for a long time. The idea that we are going to become a superpower or rival China, I doubt. But yes, I think we should be able to do, as I said, a case for cautious optimism. New politics, well, I'm not sure it's that new. We have, there was a new politics in a sense came in 1990. We ceased to have a hegemon in New Delhi. We got into the coalition era, that as highly fractured regional parties come up, the national parties don't matter so much. That continues, and I think the trend can continue. The Congress is continuing to decline, and that space will partly be filled by the BJP only, and beyond that the regionals will grow. And the rise of the Aam Aadmi Party, if you ask me, is one more example. Out of the blue, a new regional party can come. And perhaps this extends. I think this will pose a challenge in Punjab. It won some parliamentary seats out there. Let's see what happens there. The BJP, I would say, remains vulnerable and has no hegemony. I would say that, it's difficult to imagine the BJP doing better in North India than it did in last year. I think the next election, if instead of winning 73 seats, if it wins 50 seats in UP, it would still be fantastic. But it's a loss of 23 seats. In Delhi, it won all 7. It did so well last time that surely next time it can only lose seats. So I would say the BJP is vulnerable, and we've just seen that in the Delhi election. Capturing the Rajya Sabha remains elusive. The old politics, however, is changing. The rise of Modi and the stress on governance, and the rise of the Aam Aadmi once again on the issue of governance. There was the old theory of how do you win elections. And it was put very succinctly to me by a bureaucrat who used to be in the Prime Minister's office. He says the rate is, in the first 3 years you make 50,000 crores. In the next 2 years you spend 40,000 crores to buy off various vote banks. If you lose the election, you have 10,000 crores for the lean years. If you win the election, you repeat the dose with 50% escalation for inflation. So he says, this is the way you win elections. So that was, that's, to put it very crudely, that was one of the models. That is being replaced by the new one. If you have good governance, you produce bijli, sadak, pani, you give people a sense of empowerment. This newer model is beginning to will out. And this, I think, would be part of the new politics. Thank you.